Hello and welcome to another episode of the Disco Elysium podcast, Human Can Opener, presented to you by the 41st Precinct. My name is David, and as always, I'm joined by an esteemed guest from the wider world of Elysium. That guest today is a super talented musician with an impressive range of styles, reflected by his ability to conjure up musical themes in line with his eclectic taste in games and other genres of music. You and I will know him now best as the creator of the super hit Disco Elysium fan track, God Please. He is, of course, Paul Looney.
Thanks so much for having me.
You nailed it.
Nailed it. Oh, thank God.
No, thanks for coming on, Paul. I know it's our Saturday morning, so people should be having some level of sympathy because this is practically work. And we're taking time out of our Saturday to please everyone's ears. So I'm going to, like we do with most all two episodes of the podcast so far, just talk some nice relaxing questions about gaming, because I know you're a big gamer. And first of those questions is, what is your history with gaming? So I guess the question is, can you recall your first memory with games and when you first got into them?
So, like, going back to absolute bottom of my subconsciousness memory, I think is me dad bought me Rayman 2 on the PC. But the first real memory I have that's like locked in there is back when I think it's 2011, 2012, when Minecraft came out on the Xbox. I don't think I'll ever be as excited for anything in my life again the way I was excited for that, really.
How old were you then when Minecraft was coming about?
I was like the perfect age range for that. I would have been, I think around then I would have been about 10.
10. You are criminally younger than me. That's all I'll say.
My apologies.
Hence why you've got a lovely full head of hair, but you know, these are the things you got to look forward to. Ragged.
Oh, my brother's is already gone, so I'm expecting this will drop off in about 7 years.
Yeah. Genetics will come to haunt you, I'm afraid, Paul. Minecraft, that's quite amazing. So, just to age myself a little bit, I didn't get into Minecraft until my kids made me get into it. So, and my eldest wasn't born until 2013. So, I got into Minecraft probably looking at about, I don't know, 8 years after release. And the thing about Minecraft is it's one of those things that the grown-ups of the world immediately dismiss, right? But actually, I don't care who you are, play that shit because it is so much fun. It's basically Lego, but kind of like advanced. You know, the thing that I really like about Minecraft is actually, like, surface level, you're just, like, I don't know, if you're going creative and you just make a house, and it's always, for me, some shitty house with, like, you know, the classic, you know, like you drew as a kid when you're in school, like the square
little triangle roof. Yeah.
2 windows. I'm quite happy with that. But what's really impressive is how deep some of the mechanics actually go, especially like you get these wizards who use redstone and stuff. So how far advanced did you get with Minecraft? Were you one of those types of players, or?
I can't say that I was, which is kind of a bad look for me because I'm supposed to be very creatively inclined. But I'd say if you went back to some of those houses, they definitely look like that kind of classic kids drawing. But it's funny that you say the thing about adults being very dismissive of it, because back, what's that, like a decade ago?
Yeah,
my dad didn't get it then, and the trailer for the movie, now admittedly the trailer for the movie doesn't look great, but it relaunched that rant for him of being like, he's probably going to listen to this and be annoyed that I've brought this up, but he can't get over the graphics. He can't get past that.
Yeah. Is your dad a gamer then? I'm assuming if he bought you Rayman, that's quite cool.
He's huge into Warhammer and D&D at the moment.
Oh wow, Warhammer game just came out actually, didn't it? Was it 40k? I think. I mean, they're all 40.
The new Space Marine is on the horizon.
That's it. Yeah,
he's expecting myself and my brother to buy him a PS5 for Christmas, which he's not getting. But
spoilers, Dad. I'm afraid.
Sorry, Dad.
Oh, amazing. Well, that's like my dad. The furthest he ever got was bringing up my earliest memory here. Actually, Master System was in our house. In fact, I remember consoles always being around when I was a little kid. And I played it. The first game I played was a game called Teddy Boy, which absolutely nobody will remember. But he was mad into that. He still talks about it now. And he got as far as Crash Bandicoot. That's kind of when games were still simple enough that he could play them. Anything after that, he struggles with. But Crash Bandicoot's great. So
that's a classic. It's not a bad one to go out on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the remake trilogy is fantastic. But did you play 4? Did you play Crash 4?
I actually haven't touched any of them, to be honest. I've watched, who is it? I think the Only Plays guys. I've rewatched them play Crash Bandicoot 2 like 5 times. But that'll be it.
2's great. 2's probably the best. I was just going to rant about how terrible 4 is, but if you haven't played it, it's a bit pointless. So,
is it not good?
Do you know what? Mechanically and everything, and the feel of it, it's very Crash Bandicoot and it's great. The thing that they got wrong was they made the levels really, really long. And with a game like that, you need to feel like that constant progress. Like, so like with Crash 2, you had, for example, you'd have a world and I think it had, 5 or 6 levels and a boss. And the levels were fairly, like the length of the level was perfect. And they were challenging enough and intricate enough that you'd kind of end up repeating them if you were dying a lot. But once you got to it, was pretty good, and you just kept going and kept going. You just kept getting that nice little feeling of completing a level. But you get that about 3 times within one level with Crash 4. It feels like 3 levels within a level, so you can kind of get frustrated. They did like a checkpointing system for modern gamers, which helped, but. Yeah, it just felt like sometimes it's like, God, is this level ever going to end? That was my only problem with it. It's okay.
It seems like a kind of sign of the times thing, trying to show off. Was that a PS5 release? Am I correct?
I actually think it just scraped into the last gen.
Right.
Yeah, it just scraped in, I think. But they did like a little updated version as they do now. Okay, what's your favourite game of all time then, Paul?
So, ignoring Disco Elysium because I owe it a lot. If I had to say absolute favorite, I'd actually go with do you know Spelunky?
I do. Yes.
That's like the perfect game to me. I know that game like the back of my hand. And then otherwise I'd probably say Fallout New Vegas is an obvious one. And then a kind of going against the RPG grain, I'd actually, even though it's quite recent, I'd probably put Doom Eternal is the last game I remember playing to absolute death.
Yeah, literally. So those choices are so Spelunky. First of all, I have played it, but not much. It's a kind of procedurally generated, platformery, diggerly roguelike, right?
Yeah.
Do you know the guys that do GameScoop at IGN? Are you familiar with them?
I don't think so.
Well, there's a guy called Damon Hatfield on there, and he says Spelunky is like the absolute, perfect example of gaming fun. So I do mean to go back to it. I absolutely should. Fallout New Vegas, right? I'm not in the New Vegas camp, Paul.
Really?
No, I know that's absolutely absurd. I just didn't like a lot of the casino, I'm probably misremembering here. I didn't like the ending a lot. The whole robot thing controlling everything and all the rest of it. And I didn't like the yellow. Everything's so yellow. And I know that's a criticism of Fallout 3, right? Is everything's fucking green. But yeah, I don't know. It just didn't click with me in the same way that Fallout 3 did.
I think, when you say you don't like New Vegas in a community like Disco Elysium's, it's kind of you're expecting to be lined up and shot. But I think with New Vegas, there's such a love for that game that people do ignore like some of its more obvious flaws. Like that game is very janky. I can understand how, yeah, the writing's fantastic, but yeah, you are gonna have to get past the fact that it's kind of cobbled together, and also even for the time, what's that, like 2010? The graphics are a bit dated. There's some really ugly spots in that game.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that this is, and Fallout 3 has exactly got the same problems, right? But I think for the difference between, Fallout 3, I think there's a nostalgia element where it was like, I'd never played anything like that before. I think maybe I'd touched Elder Scrolls 4 actually, but it didn't have that same feeling of Fallout 3. And then you never capture that magic again. So I wonder if I'm guilty of just not clicking with New Vegas.
I think that happened for a good few people. I know, your man, Yahtzee Croshaw from Zero Punctuation.
Yep.
I know when he reviewed New Vegas, he wasn't particularly fond of it because he, at the time, I'm sure he's changed tack somewhat now, but he kind of saw it as like a big, almost standalone DLC for 3. Yeah, and then the fact that it performed so poorly and stuff. I mean, I watched that review now, and I feel like, that scene in Interstellar where he's in the bookcase and he's banging on the door. That's me trying to yell at him, no, go back, review it again.
do you know what? I will go back because, I haven't had my Xbox set up downstairs for quite a while, and I set it up yesterday. I was like, what should I play on Game Pass? Because I was just looking for some cozy, kind of comfy feeling game. So I downloaded Octopath Traveler 2, and I was like, I really should give New Vegas another try because it's been a few years since I played it, so maybe I will. What was the other choice that you said? What was the third one? Sorry,
Doom Eternal.
Eternal. I played probably about the first half hour of Doom Eternal, but I went into it straight after Doom 2016 because I hadn't played either of them, and I was like, well, I'll just play them back to back. By the time I'd finished Doom 2016, I was fatigued. I was like, oh, no, I can't.
That's fair.
I was like, I can't do any more of this because there's a couple of new mechanics as well in Eternal.
Heaps, yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, no, I'll come back to you another day. But I love those games.
It's such a different feeling game from 2016 in a lot of ways, and I couldn't blame you there because you think like by the end of Doom 2016, especially if you're playing on harder difficulties, it is like, takes a lot out of you. And then Eternal is like a whole other... It's like they kept calling it... What is it? Combat chess was the term they kept using for 2016.
Okay,
and if that's the case, Eternal is like you took the chessboard and you threw on a bunch of Warhammer stuff as well, and you're like, work that in.
Yeah. I think that's probably part of the problem because like I'd got to the end of 2016 and you just start to feel that I can fucking take on anything here. I've nailed the formula. And then Eternal, I was like, holy fucking shit, I don't know anything. It's like I'm useless. Good choices, Dave. My best friend Gaz will be very impressed with your choice of Doom Eternal, especially.
Oh, lovely.
What are you playing at the moment? Is there anything that you got your teeth into at the moment, Paul?
The only game I'm really spending time on at the moment is Animal Well. I don't know if you've played that.
It's on my list. I just played Cult of the Lamb actually, and
I've heard that's good.
I was between those two. But tell us about Animal Well first of all. I don't know too much about it. It stuck out to me as something interesting, and a few people I've seen online talking about it. So tell us about that.
So it's a Metroidvania, although a much more kind of stripped back one to some extent. Like there's no combat really. There's very minimal kind of inventory management and stuff. It's definitely in the vein of stuff like Metroid in terms of atmosphere, but it's a lot more pulled back. It's got this kind of aesthetic that's like a sort of nightmarish yet weirdly comforting VHS thing.
Okay.
I think that's what impresses me the most playing it so far is the minimalism. Like the soundtrack is all, basically every track on the soundtrack is like, there's nothing longer than 2 minutes. It's all very sparse kind of synth work and soundscape stuff, and I love that stuff. To me, that's like the highlight of the game.
Yeah. Cult of the Lamb it sounds actually similar because it's a roguelike, probably more in the vein of Hades. Actually, I would say in that you've got like a little hub. It's a really neat twist. I won't like you. the premise of the game is, so you know the whole old trope of sacrificial lamb. So he's like you're a sacrificial lamb, but then you get sacrificed, and then like the god of death is like, no, we need to, like, you're now my prophet, or you're like my, I can't remember what the word is, but you're now my guy. And there's this weird, like, you're recruiting all of these really cute little animals, but you're obviously running a cult dedicated to the god of death. So it's like you're sacrificing them, and there's just blood and guts, and you can make them eat meals of their own shit. Like, honestly, it's insane. I think it was an Australian game. They're bonkers down there, aren't they? So hardly surprising. So other than games, we'll do this one by one. I want to know what kind of media you like, and if you're not really into either of the formats, you can just say it's fine. TV shows. Do you have a favourite TV show of all time? Is that the kind of thing that you engage with much?
I'm quite the basic bitch here, because I'm going to say The Sopranos, but that's just being honest, you know.
Hey, actually, I will defend you there. There's nothing basic bitch about being a big Sopranos fan, because it came along before streaming was a big deal, right? And that and The Wire don't get anywhere near the attention they deserve in modern day fandom, I don't think. So I think you're actually a really cool person for saying The Sopranos.
Thank you.
You're watching anything at the moment? Is there anything that you're finding interesting at the moment on TV? Or is it not really something you bother with that much?
Oh, the last thing I watched might kind of, like, you know, we're on a podcast talking about games, and I feel like Sopranos is quite far outside of the kind of nerd realm we're in. And now I'm going to say the last thing I watched was actually The Last Dance on Netflix, about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, that's amazing, though.
It's so good.
That is honestly one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. That guy is wired different, right?
He really is. It's hard not to. I think there's a bit in the last episode where they're on the bus, the tour bus, to play, I think, for the 6th championship. And somebody says, like, an ESPN commentator is like, Michael Jordan's strongest attribute is he is constantly present. Like, people spend their whole lives trying to be present, and they go to India to do retreats, and that man was just born like that.
Yeah.
And you really do get it.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. I talk about so there's two people I think are the prime example of what it actually takes. I mean, there are other examples, but I like these two in particular. Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan are examples of just what you need in your head to actually be not only the best at your sport, but actually generationally and basically forever. No one will talk about basketball or golf again for the rest of time without mentioning those two names, because they took the sport and they took what you could do with their sport to a level that basically every generation afterwards has to thank them for it. Simple as that.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
That's kind of the argument going forward with. See, I'm trying to go for a home run here. I've already probably annoyed my dad, so now I'm going to annoy one of my best mates, John, here, and bring up. There's that constant debate in the NBA of, like, best player of all time, and it usually comes down to Michael Jordan or LeBron James.
Yeah.
And I still feel kind of camp Michael Jordan just because of what you said, where it's like the man, as literally as possible, changed that entire game. His influence is undeniable, even if maybe LeBron has been playing better for a while. I don't think he has that.
Yeah, there's an exact same thing going on in golf now, right? Once Tiger's dominance stopped, there was a whole mixed bag of different players who, you know, they'd win majors, you know, one year and then kind of fall off. But there's now this guy called Scotty Scheffler, and all of the numbers suggest that he is tracking like Tiger, but he will never be Tiger. It's just, it's sad for him. But he'll never, like, because you can only do that elevation of the sport once. You know, before Tiger came along, I don't know if it was the same for Michael Jordan. I think basketball was always pretty big, but he must have elevated it, you know, beyond. But golf in particular was old blokes, old rich guys who wore ridiculous outfits. They weren't cool, they weren't athletic. And then Tiger comes like beefed up in Nike and has this ferocity about him. Same with Jordan. They just had this ferocity and this like elite sport mentality where they were just on a different plane to anyone else.
Yeah,
it's quite amazing.
Agreed.
Books, are you much of a reader?
God, no. Much less than I should be. What is the last book? I was reading Dune for a bit, and I really enjoyed it. I don't remember why I put it down. Otherwise, I have kind of a passing to decent interest in a lot of Buddhist-related stuff.
Oh, interesting.
So the last, I think the last book I properly finished. Actually, here's if you want to contrast. The last two books I listened to as audiobooks were Fear, which is by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a really big Buddhist leader, about his discussion of fear and how we overcome it. And then also, I don't know if you're familiar with the Scottish comedian Limmy, but his autobiography. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know he did an autobiography. That's amazing.
It's very good.
Limmy's one of these people. He is just like, there'll be like something in the zeitgeist or the news, and there'll be like on a Limmy clips on YouTube or something, there'll be just him remarking on it. He's just got this amazing delivery of just really normal stuff, right? He doesn't really say anything particularly like, it's not like he's writing comedy and then spitting out. He's just kind of observing the world, and the way he does it is absolutely hilarious. Have you seen his James Corden video? You ever seen that?
I've seen him trying to watch James Corden on Carpool Karaoke, and he like cannot get through it.
There's I think there was it like a clip? There was some sort of, it was like a backstage thing or something where I think, was it Vanity Fair or someone like that? They do like this stupid interview thing in America where they interview these celebrities, and it's so fake and just American, basically. And he's watching that, and it's quite funny just seeing him go, yeah, he's all right, he's a nice bloke. Because you just know, you know, it's just the way he kind of puts it across is way funnier than I ever could. That's a good one, though. I'm thanks for that, because I didn't know that he'd done one. I'm bang up for a bit of Limmy. Favorite movie or movies? Any that stick out?
So, the last movie I watched that really got to me, moved me, was the film. Do you know Perfect Days?
I don't actually know. What's that?
I cannot. Wim Wenders, that's the director. I kept getting ads for it, and I just went to see it in Dublin. I didn't have a ton to be at, and I went to see it. And I mean, I left that cinema like flooded with tears. It was a bad look. I was like trying to go down and get my bus, and you're in Dublin as well, so you don't want to be walking down with tears in your eyes for fear you're going to get mugged. But that was excellent. I'd probably put that, and then to be a generic film bro, probably Blade Runner 2049 is a very special place in my heart.
I watched that recently, actually, for the second time, because I love that game so much. It's a movie. Just the whole aesthetic of it, and I think Ryan Gosling is like one of the coolest people on earth.
He's brilliant in that. Yeah,
he's really, really good. Drive's like one of my favourite films of all time, and I think
it's another great one that it's kind of a stigma to say you love because of the Film Bro Association, but it is so good. It's such a good movie. Like.
Yeah, this is the thing. Things become cool and then suddenly uncool because of how cool they become, and it's just like,
yes.
So I've got really fond memories of Drive. I was in Peru on a trip to go and see Machu Picchu, and we were in this hostel, and a friend of mine was like, should we watch Drive? I was like, I have no idea what that is. So now, not only is it a great film with a beautiful aesthetic, it's now tied to probably one of the best couple of weeks of my life. So, but Blade Runner 2049, I think it's one of those. It's also like, because it's a sequel of such a classic as well. I think people are like, well, you know, the original's better. How dare you besmirch my Blade Runner name? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think I don't think as many people have watched it as perhaps they should.
I mean, it's my on the list of hot takes right next to. Well, it's not a hot take to say Michael Jordan's better than LeBron, but it annoys some people. Probably would be. Yeah, I do prefer 2049. Not by much, but they're extremely different films. Like if the original is this kind of weird lucid dream, then 2049 is like a horrible nightmare. It's a lot more visceral and loud, and I don't know, it gets under my skin more in a way.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah. Some good choices there, I have to say. Very good choices. So now, we're entering into the world of music.
Oh God.
I fucking love music, by the way. So I want to start. I want to start with that. So my missus, like, do you ever remember? I don't know if you remember those game shows. It's like a couples game show, right? Where you have to guess like what your partner would have said to win money or whatever. And I always like I test her now and then. So I've got 3 passions in life, real big passions: gaming, music, and golf. And I always say to her, if that quiz ever comes up, what's the one? And she always says gaming. And I'm like, no, it's music. Music is like, most games are better with good music. Most films are better with good music. Every single form of everything that you enjoy is better with music. It's like time travel as well. I'm not going to waffle, because I realise I'm waffling now, and I'm just going to rant like some crazy man outside a train station ranting about music. So you are, of course, a musician. Something I never really got the hang of, to my shame. And we will talk about your music in particular, but I would like to know, what did you grow up listening to? Who are your favourite bands, artists, scores, etc.? Anything that springs to mind from when you were growing up?
So, growing up, and I mean like quite young, like preteen going into teen, I definitely took after my dad and my brother. Although my brother was just taken after my dad in a sense, and my dad loves his metal and Iron Maiden and such, which I do still have quite a fondness for. Classic rock stuff like AC/DC and all that, less so, not as much my thing. But I would have kind of grown up on that, and then going into, as usually happens, going into my like teen years, I slowly kind of came more into my own, I guess. My tastes diversified a lot from there. Like, I feel like if somebody asks me what you listen to, I always feel the need to say like, I listen to a bit of everything, but I don't mean that in the sense of, usually if somebody says that, they mean like top 40. Well, I mean, like,
it's my least favorite answer to that question, actually. When people say,
it's a bad one.
I go, okay, what's your favorite death metal song? And I go, because you don't, but it's one of them. If you've got eclectic tastes, what else do you say? Do you know what I mean? Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, well, all I was going to say was, I mean, I take a very I've been told kind of intense approach to listening to music. I have a very strict schedule of like 2 albums a week, and I listen to each album at least 4 or 5 times before I'm done, and I'm very like to the button there, because to me that's like it's basically the only way to get good at writing music, I think. It's just listening to heaps of it.
Yeah, I can imagine that. You pick up a lot. I always encourage my kids. So Taylor Swift, Blank Space, just as an example. It's like Banger. It's ridiculously catchy, right? And when my kids are like singing along to it, I say, listen to what actually makes this song amazing. Like, if you just like remove the lyrics and Taylor Swift singing and listen to how they construct the melody and the beat and everything, that's what hooks you. And then the lyrics are, bit of with pop music, they are what they are, right? They are a nice little relatable song. But I always find like when you actually this is the thing, I don't think many people really listen and actually understand what it is that's making them tick. And to your point, listening to something, I'm a little bit the same. Once I get into something, particularly an album or a particular artist at a time, I kind of go all in with them, and I'll listen over and over and over again.
I'm the exact same.
Yeah, I really like doing that. But then sometimes I cripple myself, and I'm like, can't be asked for that anymore. Do you know what I mean? I just
you kind of drain all the feeling out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I hate myself for doing it, but I can't help it. What about? Actually, I'm going to ask that after. What are some of your contemporary artists, or any that you really like at the moment? Any that you'd recommend to the listeners?
coming out right now. So, well, first off, I've been kind of shamelessly going off on Instagram about the new Magdalena Bay album,
Okay.
Imaginal Disc, which is, oh my God, like it's been a while since I've been so obsessed with an album. It's this like kind of, I'd call it's like a synth pop epic of like just, it's like pure fantastic pop songs with tons of weird little twists and turns. And then otherwise, in preparation for this, I was like, ah, it's a big question. And then I was like, I'm just going to shamelessly list off a bunch of Irish artists I like,
Oh,
if that's all right.
yeah, go for it. I'd love you to do that. Go for it.
So, first off, I'd say FA, which is spelled EFE, and then Fada, which for people not acquainted with Irish is just like an accent, basically.
Yeah.
She, her guitarist is a guy called John Malarkey, very good friend of mine. Love you, John, if you're listening. Probably not, but I was just in a band with him. We've just broken up there, but he plays guitar for her at the moment, and she is amazing. Like, she's like everything I want Irish music to be. It's really colorful and punchy. There's a lot of doom and gloom in Irish music, and I'm getting sick of it. So I love that. It's a band called Brick Nasty, who are like jazz fusion, if that's your thing. They're brilliant. The Scratch are one of my favorite bands ever. They're like a trad metal fusion with kind of, I hate the phrase Celtic influence because it's a very kind of Irish American thing to say, but it is what it is. And then I'd say Sexy Tig as well. They're like a drag artist. They have a show on soon. I think I'm going to. And the first time I saw them live, it was like, in a good way, getting clocked on the side of the head. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. You got you've got such a wide, varied taste in music. I'm always blown away by people like that, because you don't meet many. You really don't. Like, most people are kind of just whatever's on the radio, right? Which is fine. I've got no problem with pop music at all. I love a lot of it, but it's always good to talk to people who can list those genres and actually understand them. It's really refreshing. Top recommendations, and I'm sure the Irish music community will thank you for it, Paul.
It's all for clout.
All for the clout, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, the wide variation of games that you reference in your music is obviously, had a real influence on you, and you're obviously passionate about music that is in games. Do you have a favourite video game OST? I know what mine is.
See, because I don't want to be like, it's the Disco Elysium one, which it is.
Yeah. Well, that's what my answer was going to be. So you
it would be wrong to say anything else because I owe it so much. If we're going askew of that, there's another obvious answer, but the Hotline Miami games are like,
oh yes,
fantastic,
great. It's Moon, right? Moon, is it a guy called Moon does a lot of them?
I found out a while ago, back in college, I was writing a little paper on the music of those games and how I feel they make really good use of like BPM for building tension as the game goes on. And I found out through my research in that Moon was something sickening. Moon was like 13 when they made those tracks. I know. I hope I'm misremembering that, but it was something like that. Wow. Something where I maybe want to throw up. I was just like, oh my God.
Some people are just annoyingly talented, aren't they? Do you remember Disclosure were quite young, weren't they? Do you remember those guys? They don't really do much anymore. But I think they were only like 14, 15 when they were getting their first hits out there. They were very young.
I mean, one I always think of as well is like Aphex Twin. I think was around the same age when he started.
There's a funny story about Aphex Twin. Like he went out to his first club night. I mean, this is kind of mythical now, this story, so I don't know if it's absolutely true, but there's this kind of story that when he eventually went out clubbing for the first time, I don't know whether he like 89, 90 or something like that. He was hearing this, what would have been at the time, the likes of Prodigy knocking out like acid techno, acid house, whatever they were calling it at the time, and he was like, I've been making this at home. He was like, this is the stuff that I've been making since I was like a little kid. Yeah, he's just, and again, he's I think a hell of a lot of people know him, but he never he had his mainstream moment, didn't he? Like in the 2000s but I would say his videos were what got him the attention then.
Definitely, yeah.
It was like Rubber Johnny and
Window Licker, I was thinking.
Window Licker.
Come to Daddy as well.
Come to Daddy, yeah. And he added the weird face on the album cover, I remember that. But a supremely talented human being. Jesus, it's honestly... I really like
absurd.
He did a load of stuff under. He's got various pseudonyms, I think, but the stuff he does under the name The Tuss is really, really interesting. It's really like melodic, ambient kind of stuff. It's really nice. Saw him live twice. So
really,
yeah. Saw him.
I'm jealous.
There's a place called Warehouse Project in Manchester, which it's one of those things now that's got so popular that it's kind of not worth going to anymore. But back when it was cool and I was cool, we used to go there and see like I saw Jamie XX. Do you know Jamie XX?
I love Jamie XX.
Do you really?
I've seen him quite. Actually, his new album is coming out like right before I move, so that's very much going to be the soundtrack. Yeah.
Right, now we're into something, because Jamie XX is like one of my and the band are one of my favorite artists of all time. Jamie XX, the album he did with Gil Scott-Heron was absolutely amazing.
I haven't listened to that yet.
Oh, so good. It's just before Gil Scott-Heron died, so he was like a spoken word poet. Do you know the song by Rihanna and Drake called Take Care?
Take Care, yeah.
It was Jamie XX.
You can. I love that track because that whole thing screams Jamie XX. Like the really spacious keys, and there's a little bit of a steel drum in there, which he's obsessed with for some reason. He's always using that in his tracks.
Far Nearer is just basically steel drums all the way through, which is brilliant. I remember seeing them at Glastonbury. I wasn't there. I watched it on BBC. I've not been to Glastonbury. I'm not that fortunate, but they had the setup on the stage. I think they closed out the Sunday night on one of the stages one year, and Jamie had like this desk that was just fucking God knows how many different drums and synthesizers and just boards of God knows what. And it's amazing how much of the XX's music he is responsible for. He's like all over the place, like running around, pressing all his buttons, hitting all these things, and he's just he's a genius. I really like Romi's album, actually. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't yet.
It's basically like 90s trance, but with her singing over it, which is pretty cool for an old guy like me, anyway. Yeah, Disco Elysium is the best OST anyway. It's just not really. Yeah. It's not really up for debate. I would maybe chuck Final Fantasy VII in there as a competitor. But other than
what I know of that is great, but it also doesn't make me feel, from what I know of it, like crushing despair, and that's the mark,
Yeah. Oh God, what's your favorite Disco Elysium track then?
Probably be, I might butcher the pronunciation here, which is bad because I technically have a degree in French, but La Chevauchelier, near the end of the soundtrack. That's like that was, I think, the moment playing the game where I was like, oh, I need to start composing again, don't I? Or like I heard that and I just amazing.
I would have just said see, I can't even say it, so pointless even trying. Polyhedrons is probably my favourite, but then I do.
Oh, that's a great one.
But I do like Zaum, the one it's just like a really nice, chilled version of the main theme, basically. And Jamrock Hobo asked me to describe it last time, and I'm not going to do that again because it was embarrassing.
I thought it was fine. I listened to that whole thing on a train down to Kerry in the south of Ireland. And I actually thought that was a cool pick. I was like, yeah, that is a really lovely track. It's cool. It plays at weird kind of moments in the game. I swear it's somewhat random.
It does, yeah.
When it does drop.
It does. There's a few, like Instrument of Surrender and Detective Arriving on the Scene. They seem to be the ones that kind of dip in and out of just your exploration of the world. Just like that kind of, background noise. Okie dokie. So how would you say the urge to make your own music came about?
So I can actually pinpoint it. It was around 2016. I was watching. I should have brought this up when we were talking about TV shows. I was watching. Have you watched? Now I've only seen the first 2 seasons of it, but you know the HBO series Westworld.
Yes. Yep.
So I was watching the first season of that, which I loved, and I still love.
It's
And
amazing.
I won't say much about the other seasons, but the first season is terrific.
I completely agree.
And
yeah,
it's so good. And Ramin Djawadi did the music for that. Who's best known for Game of Thrones. Who's fantastic.
Huge fan. Yeah.
Oh, he's so good.
Yeah.
And I was watching that, and I think it was. There's a theme in that show called Sweetwater, which is just for the main town. And his writing style is very much in tune with how I like writing, which is like kind of no frills, to the point, melody first. And I remember just watching that show and something twigging in me where I was like, I feel like I could do that, or at the very least, I want to try doing that. And then it just kind of went from there, and it became a bit of an obsession for me for a while.
Mate, did you start off with like what was it like? Do you do all your stuff through a DAW, or were you learning to play instruments and stuff first? What, chicken or egg? Which came first?
So, well, I when I was younger, I had a bit of a few lessons on the piano, something like the choir in school, but the only instrument I can competently play is the drums. Like I have actual qualifications for that, and I teach it, but that's it. So anything else, it was more me learning how to use, like you were saying, like a DAW. Namely, I actually think I started on LMMS, which is like the shitey free version of Fruity Loops, and then I quickly learned that if you load more than 3 plugins onto LMMS, it like explodes. So I acquired Fruity Loops definitely through legal means, and kind of went from there.
Yeah. Do you still use Fruity Loops, or did you move on to more advanced? Because I know Fruity Loops is completely capable, but it's not like Logic or Cubase that immediately, like when you think of, or Ableton maybe, where you immediately think of them as DAWs.
See, it's kind of I am still using FL now. I'm using the latest version of it now, which has nothing to do with, as I said, because I acquired it through legal means this whole time for sure. But anyway, now I'm using the most updated version. Yeah. But it's kind of like a mark of shame in some circles to say you use FL.
That's kind of why I was saying it, because I know through musical circles that people kind of scoff at it, but I think it does exactly what you need it to do, right? And it's as universal as probably anything else. In fact, actually, I think the simplicity of the front end for people using Fruity Loops is actually quite refreshing in my opinion, because I tinkered with Logic for a bit. You need a fucking degree to use that application. Honestly, it's like the level of understanding you have to have about every single facet of it, and I think that's what put me off a lot of it. Actually, was just how complicated it was. So I'll stand with you on that, on Fruity Loops.
Well, see, so when I was doing my I've done my undergrad, and first year of my undergrad, I was doing music tech, and I dropped it in years 2 and 3 and mainly focused on academic stuff. But I do remember in that first year, the one they were trying to get us to use was Pro Tools. Okay, because they're always, they love banging on about how Pro Tools is the industry standard. And whenever I could, I just went back to Fruity Loops. The only reason I use Fruity Loops is because that's what I picked back then, and that's what I know how to use. Like, I'm not actually the most technically minded person when it comes to, like, I know how to mix.
Yep.
And that's good enough for me. And even when I'm mixing, I have a lot of fancy plugins that I mainly use presets on. I know how to tweak certain things. I know what sounds good at this point through sheer like trial and error, like hitting my head against a brick wall kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that'd be it. So FL is like, I on the one hand, I'm like, on the one hand, I want to be like, oh, it's just as valid as any other DAW. And then I see like an artist I love uses it, and I feel really seen. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, I think it's do you know Kate Renata?
I don't know. No.
He's a excellent house artist. I found out he uses it, and also Joey Valance and Bray, who are a hip hop duo. I found out Joey Valance uses it, and I felt ashamed of how excited that made me. Like, oh my god, someone else uses FL. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's artistos are the worst for snobbery, unfortunately.
Oh yeah,
but that's what we're all about, isn't it?
Of course.
Yeah, I will just remark on the fact that season 1 of Westworld was complete genius, and I can't believe how much they dropped the ball, and they seem to keep dropping it with every season that came after, but we won't go into it.
I heard 3 was, a mate of mine watched 3 and he said it is not good, and I was like, I'm not even going to try.
You could see it was like 2 wasn't horrendously bad, but I was like, the direction. Do you know what I really didn't like was Dolores? Is that her name?
I didn't like, the direction they went with her in season 2, where they kept trying to hype up that she's, I think,
making her a supervillain type thing in the end, weren't they? Pretty much.
Yeah, which to me fundamentally misunderstands what makes. They clearly wanted Westworld to be their next Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones was ending around the time, and this was before that all went, as awful as it did. So they wanted Westworld to be their next thing, and what I think they misunderstood is that Game of Thrones is a show about characters, and Westworld isn't really. Westworld is more about ideas and the kind of mystery of it all. Yeah. And the first season gets that, and season 2 does not, for the most part.
No, exactly. And I think that's actually part of the problem, isn't it? Because the curtain was raised on, in Westworld, where that mystery just wasn't there really anymore. Which, as you rightly point out, was a big part of the appeal. Ah, well, on to the next disastrous TV show. So you've got a lot of really cool fan songs,
Thank you,
which are dedicated to games. Because I can't remember off the top of my head, let me just open. I've got a little list here. I made a list. This is how bad my memory is and how good my prep is. They work very well together.
See, I was going to say this is how the pros do it. I think you can spin that,
Yeah, this is purely pro people at home. Leviathan Approaching, No Man's Sky. Chaos, Master of the Void was a fan song for Hades. Containing Calamity was for Breath of the Wild. The Pacifist's Journey for Undertale. The Bebop Quartet for Cowboy Bebop. You did some other song for some shit disco game or something. Oh
no, that's the Lighthouse.
You also did God Please for Disco Elysium, of course. But I will talk about God Please in a second.
I'm not familiar with that one, so you can skip it if you want.
No one wants to hear about that on this podcast. So where did the idea first come about to do those kinds of tribute songs? Were you like, was it a practice thing for you, or did you have like a real passion for the games and wanted to do something similar?
So half of that answer is like genuine and artistic, and the other half is quite cynical. So the first half being, practice would be the right word. It was like, it's a good way to try and hone your skills as a producer if you're trying to ape the styles of like other games, like trying to figure out how did they do that.
Yeah.
Or in a lot of cases, I would start with that as a template, and then I'd kind of make it my own thing. Like the drums on the Hades one, Chaos Master of the Void, I'm still quite happy with. I included that in my like little sizzle reel thing that got me into my masters, and the drums on that don't sound anything like the drums that are on Hades. The drums on that are actually like jazz brush drums run through a stomp compressor, which gives them this really weird, like sharp, punchy kind of distance sound. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, it was like trying to ape these things while making it my own and making it unique. And then on the other hand, on the more cynical side, it was just, it's a good way to get people to look at your stuff. You're kind of attaching yourself to look at fucking God Please. You're attaching yourself to a pre-existing thing like that. God Please wouldn't be anywhere without like the Disco Elysium fan base, as an example,
Yeah, good point. And it's a good shout to do that. I think that was kind of where I was like, I'm glad to hear that I wasn't, barking up the wrong tree with the practice thing. But I think it's a really, really, you've thought about it really well, actually, and the way you've approached it is really clever. Interestingly, so did you always? So I obviously, I came to your stuff probably after some of this stuff was already up online, right? In fact, I think I even found God Please later than most people. So was it always the first idea to kind of just put it out on YouTube, or did you ever explore any other avenues, or did you just think that was the easiest way to do it?
YouTube, yeah, was definitely the easiest, and it was just a matter of I wasn't putting a ton of stock into that kind of thing. Like when I started, it was a fun hobby outside of school. I knew I wanted to do something music related, but I was kind of keeping my options open. And then when I went back to it after my undergrad, it was the same thing. It was just, I'll put it up and see what happens. It's only very recently that I've gone, okay, I should probably take this somewhat seriously. And now I've got stuff on like streaming services and whatnot. But yeah, it was more just a case of that was the easiest way to get stuff up, you know?
Yeah, it makes sense. Now, let's talk about God Please. So this is now at 1.7 million views on YouTube. That is quite amazing. So let's hear it then. How did it all start, and what was your creative process when you were making God Please?
You said let's hear it, and I thought you were going to play it, and I was like, oh god, no, I'm going to nitpick so many things here. It started with, ironically, kind of the same thing as when I made the Westworld one, where I was playing Disco Elysium when I think in the middle of 2022. I think, yeah, it was after I finished my undergrad. I played a bit of it, and then I came back to it, and I beat the whole thing in like a week and adored it. And I say it was that bit where you show up to the deserter's island. In my mind, that's where I was like, I need to write something. But I actually don't recall if it was that. I think it was, I really wanted, I just love the sound of that soundtrack. And it triggered that same part of my brain that was like, I feel like I can do this. And also I have a lot more experience producing since, because, I've done all this stuff. I've also done music for me mates. I've been involved with like a lot of other artists, and sorry, train of thought. Yeah, I was like, I have more experience now. I could go back and really try and ape this particular sound, and I was really not expecting much out of that one at all. Like I liked it, I still like it, but I kind of slapped it together. It literally took, I think, 3 or 4 hours, and then it was done. And I
Wow.
was like, okay, yeah, I work very quickly, and I was like, yep, happy with that. Threw it up, and I remember texting my brother and being like, oh, it's got all these views now. And I actually found an old text conversation with him where I was like, oh my god, it's hit like 10,000 views. Like this is nuts.
How quick
So
did that happen? How quick did that happen, do you
it
think?
was quick enough as far as I recall. I remember it being quick enough that I was really taken aback, where I was like, wow. And people kept commenting on it on Reddit, and I was like, wow, this is lovely. I wasn't I'd had success before with stuff I'd written.
Yeah.
But this was like ridiculous, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. There was a comment. You used to have it pinned, but I think you pinned a new one because you'd obviously announced that you got your album stuff coming out, which we will talk about.
Yeah, I just shamelessly plug that. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know. There's no shame. But I think you'd mentioned on there, or I'd seen you mention somewhere online that you were going into your was it degree of some sort related to
Masters,
music.
yeah.
Your masters, yeah. Sorry. So, how tell us a little bit about that? You mentioned briefly that you had a sizzle reel. So, what was the application process like for that? I'm guessing the entry requirements are pretty hard. So, tell us a little bit about that.
It was kind of terrifying, basically. So I did my undergrad. My undergrad was in musicology, which is like the academic side of music, just writing papers and whatnot. Because I am like fairly good at writing. I was good at it in school. Although my brother's a PhD, so he's more the academic. But I finished that undergrad, and then when I started writing again and God Please took off, I I threw together that whole Fan Songs Volume 2 album in like 3 months. And
Wow.
I thought like, I had this kind of epiphany where I was like, I actively go out of my way to write music in my spare time, and I don't do that when it comes to like writing about music, or I rarely do. And it made me kind of reconsider where I was going, because my plan was to just take a year out and then do a master's in musicology. And then when I realized maybe composing was more my call, I was then put in an awkward position where I was like, okay, but my degree, my undergrad is in musicology. I only have so much of a background. So getting into a master's for composition is going to be hard because I'm going to have to really convince them with external work.
Yeah.
So then I just spent the whole year basically writing as much as I could, doing as much commission work as I could until I had enough put together. I applied to the University of Leeds first, and they rejected me on pretty good grounds, actually, where they felt I'd kind of misunderstood. There was a lot more to do with interactive audio stuff there.
Okay.
But then Hertfordshire, which is where I'm headed, the University of Hertfordshire, literally, I think it was 4 days before Christmas, and I was not in a good place, and I was miserable. And then I just got this email, and they had given me like an unconditional offer, which blew my mind. And I also found out afterwards that sizzle reel was, I think, like 20. What was it? It was like 20 pieces of music in the span of 5 minutes. And I sent it to them with my application, and I was like, oh, I really hope this is good enough. And then only afterwards I looked up like other people's sizzle reels who had done this masters, and theirs were like 3 pieces of music over 2 minutes. And I was like, oh, okay. But it got me in, so.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, congratulations. I think.
Thank you.
Many people were really happy to see that. I remember the comment got a lot of love, and
it did. It was really, really nice.
And the song still gets a lot of love. And I think you captured the essence of the soundtrack and what it does to the game. Like, I think you could put God Please into the game, and it would never feel out of place. I think that's the beauty of it. I can hear like. So I've seen people point out that you included some horns, which were obviously influenced a little bit by Instrument of Surrender, I think it is, that has the main horn.
The same melody for the most part.
Did polyhedrons influence? At the start, there's the kind of piano-y melody. Was polyhedrons any influence there, or was that just something that you kind of conjured up yourself? Was there any influence there at all, or am I just putting 2 and 2 together and making 5?
I think there definitely could have been a subconscious influence, because I was playing that soundtrack to like absolute death before I wrote that. I have weird memories of doing my driver's theory test while just blasting the Disco Elysium soundtrack. But I think it could have, actually, because polyhedrons has that very sharp kind of sound to it, even if that track is very
the main kick is kind of along the same kind of pace as polyhedrons, I think.
That's true, actually. Yeah, it could have been that. It's kind of like taking some structural elements from polyhedrons, but going for the feel and intensity of a track like what's a good example? Like Instrument of Surrender or like Tiger King, something like that.
Yeah. I think that nailed it. That's how I feel when I listen to it. Okay, so I was going to ask about how the fan experience was, but we kind of just touched on that. You've had an amazing response from people, and you still do to this day. So I hope it continues. I'm sure it will. And more people play Disco. This is what I've realised about Disco Elysium, is there's a hell of a lot of gaming people out there who haven't played it, and more and more of them keep coming on board every week. It's amazing. So it will just keep growing, mate. It'll just keep growing.
It's actually odd how like I haven't really gotten over the fact that people still listen to it that much. Like when I put it on Spotify just there, I was posting on like my private story on Instagram, which is like 30 people on there about just like, it's 30 people who have to put up with my shite basically. And I was posting on there and bragging a bit because I put it up on Spotify and I have something like 1,700 monthly listeners now, which is like ridiculous. Like I still 2 years on cannot get over how much people like that one, and I'm really glad that they do. Like I like it. If of all the songs of mine to blow up, I'm glad it's one that I do like.
Yeah.
But some like people comment like fanfic under it and stuff like that. And one person said they were playing the game and they realized they had gotten to the scene that the track is based on, and they put the song on, and I was like, oh my god. Oh, and like your man H Bomber guy commented on it, and that made my head explode.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, and I saw your reply because obviously as part of building up to this, I was going through all kinds of your stuff forensically, and I noticed that don't worry, I didn't find any dirty underwear there, mate. You're fine. But I noticed that you'd had someone that you've been watching on YouTube for years. And he was like, he said something like, "I can't stop listening to this." Was that right? It was something like that.
He commented that, and then when I made a Reddit post to say that the track had hit 1 million views, which I attributed mainly to that subreddit and the Disco Elysium community, I just made a post to say thanks, because I couldn't get over it. And he commented on it again on Reddit and said something like, I woke up, I was working in Aldi at the time, so I woke up at 5 a.m. to go to work, and I just had a notification which was Reddit comment, and it was from him, and he said like, oh, I have this downloaded to my phone, I've listened to it like 100 times. I actually DM'd him when I put it on streaming services because he follows me on Twitter, and I DM'd him just to tell him. And he replied and said, oh, sick, great that you're getting it out there. Like I don't want to know how much of my life I've spent watching his videos, so it meant a lot.
Yeah, no, and this is, do you know, weirdly actually, Jamrock Hobo was exactly the same for me. Just being able to, honestly, I like, no disrespect to Lenville Brown because he's obviously an absolute legend, but I was really nervous about talking to Jamrock Hobo. I haven't told him that. He'll know now though.
It doesn't come off actually. I was going to say.
I'm very good at masking the inner turmoil. I've got very good at that. So
got to bottle it up.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't believe what's going on in here now. So I just so a couple of other things that people might not actually be aware that you've done. Actually, you did some scores. So you did one for a little short film called The Wasp, which is quite sad actually. I watched that. I was like, oh, this is really sad. It's a story about two sisters. Originally, one of them scared by a wasp, and the older sister, I think, is like, no, don't worry about it. We'll sort it out. Blah blah blah. And then obviously later in life, she's struggling big time with depression, I assume. And they've still got that bond. But you did the score for that, which was really, really nice, fitted really, really well. And the same goes for Hong Kong Noir, which is like...
Hong Kong.
Noir Hong Kong, sorry. Which is like...
in Hong Kong. Sorry, I just...
I butchered,
trying to promote.
No, I butchered the absolute shit out of it, so thank you for correcting me. Which is like a kind of... what is that? Because it's a game that's... It's one of those that's hosted by the IO type thing, right? So just tell me a little bit about that game first of all.
So that is the project of a mate of mine, Liam, who could be listening to this. So hi, Liam, if you are.
Hi, Liam.
And shame on you if you're not. He's been working on that game for ages, and he just followed me on Twitter one day and liked one of my tweets about God Please. So I DM'd him because I was looking at the game. It's basically a detective kind of visual novel thing.
Right. Okay.
And I DM'd him because I was like, this looks really cool. Do you want any music for it? And I wrote, I think, 5 pieces for that. And then I had to step away because I got into my master's and I wanted to just focus on my own personal work. And now that that's done, I'll be coming back. But, well, I don't know how much in need of music he is at the moment. We do still keep in touch. But yeah, that game has come along like crazy amounts. Like I would pop in and out of the Discord for it, but I was very busy this year and had a lot to deal with. And then, but I like was every time I come back in. If I'm just going to shamelessly big him up for a second, because the game is in a playable state at the moment online if you look him up. But every time I came back to it, it was just like the work he's put into that game is amazing. The artwork.
I was going to say the art's absolutely amazing in that.
It's great. He's doing some of it as well himself. He's literally been teaching himself to draw alongside all the other artists who he's paying, and now he's contributing his own art to it and stuff. And it's really, really coming along. It's very cool to see.
I love stuff like that. Like there's a couple of games that stick out where people have done it just on their own. Stardew Valley, obviously. And the music in that's fucking outstanding. Like that, no human should have as much talent as he has. Is it Eric Barone? Is that his name?
I think it is.
I think that's his name. And I can't remember the name of the fella who did Citizen Sleeper, but that was a solo project as well, I believe.
Oh, is it?
I think so. I don't think the second one is. I could be wrong. I'm sure he said something about it the other day.
I was going to say Toby Fox as well, who did Undertale.
Is that a solo project?
I kind of hate him because he made that whole game himself, and he also did that soundtrack is so long, and he did all the music, and some of the music in that game is obscenely good. Like it angers me personally.
Yeah, I hate anyone more talented than me, Paul. So
fuck them.
Exactly. So I'm just interested. Like, you're obviously doing your masters, and music's literally woven into your life at this point. So, do you think scores and things like that is something that you'd like to do, like on a regular basis, or would you not want to pigeonhole yourself into something like that?
So the thing with the masters is it's it's half musical composition and then half sound design stuff. So I'm starting it. I'm moving over in a week, and then I'm starting it. I got a really lovely comment a while ago from somebody wishing me the best and hoping that the masters is going okay. And I didn't have the heart to tell them I haven't actually started it yet, but it was very sweet. But I would love to mainly do soundtrack work and score. Like, scores would be good. I prefer working for games because there's a lot of versatility there. Like the work I did for Noir in Hong Kong was great fun because all I really had to do, I wrote mainly music for different characters in the game. There's about 4 characters I wrote for. And it was really fun because all I really had to do was write it out, get it to a decent length, and then have a version of it that, like, the tech term is like wraps. So as in, like, if you play the file and then play it back, there's like a seamless loop. And there were more complicated stuff. Like there's a track I did for that called The Needs of the Few, which is about a kind of villain character, which I'm really, really proud of that one. But that's in 3 parts, and that was intentional because in the game, certain parts only get triggered based on how far along in conversation you are and stuff like that. Okay. But to answer the question, I'd love to do that. But also, I'm very inexperienced when it comes to sound design, so I'll have to see how I get on with that. And then I assume that would be quite fun to do as well. I have mates who do Foley and stuff, and I'm clueless when it comes to that. But I'd like to do that too.
Hey, by the time this Masters is done, you'll be the next Hans Zimmer. So I've got faith in you. Nice. So you've recently published all of your songs now to Spotify. This was a couple of weeks ago, or maybe of them, maybe a little bit longer. So first of all, I'll shamelessly plug your work. Go and listen to all of Paul Looney's stuff on Spotify, everybody,
and YouTube, because there's a load of stuff I've yet to move.
and YouTube, yeah. Make sure you cover it all. You got a decent following on YouTube, actually. I noticed.
I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. He's doing really well. But the most exciting thing is that you've got a new album now, which I think did it come out at the start of September? Is that right?
That was like very literally like the last day of August.
There you go. So it's called Born Before Summer, and it's under the name Drunk Tank Pink. So I'd like to know where Drunk Tank Pink first came about. Both as an idea and a name, I think I'd like to know.
So, how it... Well, I'm going to try and keep this brief because it's a somewhat long story, but basically around 2020, I started work on an album that incorporated a lot of like what I'm into. Like, as much as I love the soundtrack stuff, I have both eclectic and very particular taste when it comes to pop music.
Yeah.
So I started making this album that incorporated a lot of that stuff, which is mainly very bright, kind of shiny baroque pop and synth pop and stuff. I don't know why my brain likes that stuff so much. Like,
I love that stuff. Yeah.
There's a real turning point in my life. Many of my friends would say for the worse was in, I think 2021 was when I properly got into the Beach Boys, and now anybody who knows me knows.
Shout.
Oh, if you talk to me for more than 5 minutes, you're entering the like risk of I might bring that band up. It's entirely possible. I am made fun of for it constantly. But so I was writing stuff that was very much influenced by that, and then it was kind of a concept album. It was way too ambitious in hindsight. And I was doing my degree and stuff, so I couldn't get it done. And then when I was taking my first year out after my degree, I'm now coming to the tail end of my second. Because at the time it was just meant to be the one, and then did a master's, whatnot. I went back to writing for myself, just like on a whim. And I started writing what was the opening track of the album, April Showers. And what's funny is I started writing it as this very fun, relaxing, kind of almost lo-fi-ish hip-hop thing.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of releasing it under a whole other name, because my nickname amongst my friends is Looney, like to the point where if people call me Paul, it's kind of weird. So I was thinking of putting it out under the name Looney with like a little exclamation mark, and it'd be kind of fun and cutesy. And then I sat and I worked on that track for another 3 hours, and it had just morphed into this very dramatic, very, to my ears, kind of anguished, anxious sounding piece. And I realized I am like incapable, unless it's for compositional purposes. If it's personal music, I'm incapable of writing anything laid back. It's just not me. Yeah. And the idea for the album kind of came from there. The title Born Before Summer is because the original album was called Summer Never Comes, which is a very fitting name because it did not come out. So then I went with that name for it. And then people always ask about the cover art, and I never know what to tell them because I'm not entirely sure. The art was done by a terrific Polish artist whose name always escapes me, and I'm going to get that up. But they did I found them on Reddit just randomly. They did a terrific job with that, and
yeah, it's beautiful. It's like a weird kind of morphed face type mask animal thing, isn't it? On the front of a pink. Yeah, very, very abstract. It's cool.
But basically, the original idea was something along the lines of, have you seen The Wicker Man?
Yep. Yeah.
It was something about people in dresses with masks really catches my eye, and I think it's, on the album, my vocals are very kind of concealed behind a lot of effects and whatnot, and to me, that's like me hiding behind it so that I can sing these lyrics that are quite personal and that I can immerse myself in this kind of, I'm going to get real pretentious here, but this kind of like sonic landscape that I've tried to make. And that I think that's the idea with the mask thing. I'm not entirely sure. There's also part of me that's just like, it looks cool, and the colors on the front, I think, convey the sound of the album. So
I like that. Especially the link to how you put the vocals.
Also, I'm just gonna. I am listening. I'm just gonna pull their name up because I feel terrible if I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I liked that, and I thought it was an interesting choice for the lyrics. I was with the singing. So to know the backstory behind that and to have the actual meaning behind it's really, really cool. I really like the album. It's right up my street, by the way. So
glad you like it.
I listened to it about 4 or 5 times this week, doing exactly what we talked about earlier, where you don't just listen to something, you listen to it non-stop. Did you get the name of the artist?
I did. So I'm gonna absolutely butcher this, right? Because I actually did remember their name, but I was like,
Pronunciation.
If I look at it, I can pronounce it. I can't. Their name is Elian Karaska. Probably butchering that, but it's Eliancha or Azka, and the A and the Z have a weird little accent. They go by at Elcha art. If anybody is interested, they did a fantastic job with that cover. So
there you go. Make sure you check that out as well. And you've actually, it's worth pointing out actually that you do have a knack for getting good art, because the art on God Please is absolutely incredible as well.
Yeah, that was a fan creation. I've also forgotten their username. I'm not going to get them up. I think they're quite well known in the community. But yeah, I just DM'd them. I saw that on Reddit and was like, "Can I use this?" And they said, "Yeah." And thank God they did, because I think that art is legitimately part of why that track took off.
They are in sync now. Yeah, it's got like the ghostly apparition behind
of eyes. Yeah,
it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So I was trying to, I wanted to be very careful not to compare your music to anybody else's, because I always think it's like, you know, it is its own thing. But I was like, listening to it, I was like, what does this, you know, is there anything that I can compare it to? For anyone that, you know, hasn't heard it yet, it reminded me of the album Plastic Beach by Gorillaz. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
You've got a lot of the same kind of like nice little melodies and sounds, and obviously the way that you put the vocals in is very similar to what Damon Albarn does with his voice on those albums. Were there any influences in other music that, you know, kind of contributed to the album, or were you just like hunkered down and just purely, you know, going for it?
It's funny you bring up Gorillaz, because you're definitely not the first. I had a bunch of people say that, and I was surprised that I didn't think of that until people said it, and I was like, oh yeah, actually, I definitely hear that. The big three would be, there's a band, do you know the band Future Islands?
Yeah, too. I can't believe your music taste is so light and it's ridiculous.
They are a huge influence. I love how they combine sounds sonically. They get a lot of shtick for like their albums all sounding kind of similar, but to me, they are so good at that one sound.
Doing what they do, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't really care. Yeah. I saw them. If you'll allow me a tangent, I saw them live in Vicar Street in Dublin. And do you know their song "Walking Through That Door"?
I do, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
During the bridge of that song, "As you hold my hand and I hold your hand and I walk in through that door," we were front row, myself and at the time my girlfriend, and he, like, the lead guy Sam Harrington, who for those who are unfamiliar is this massive hulking man with the spirit of like a ballet dancer. He like got down on his knees and he grabbed my hand and he looked like into my eyes.
Oh wow.
While he was singing that, and oh my god, like I could have cried.
Wow, that's amazing. What a story.
Spectacular. But yeah, so they're a huge influence. There's also, do you know the artist Wise Blood?
No, not familiar with that one.
She's a singer-songwriter, very kind of, the term would be chamber pop, which is that big kind of spacious sound, like Hosier would be a good example. But she's amazing. Her last album, In the Darkness Hearts Aglow, it was a big influence. I love the sound of that thing. And then the looming specter over all my work since 2021 is Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. Just the way he combines and arranges stuff is like a driving factor in basically all my work, but very much that album.
I'm so, like, it's very rare I talk to someone ever beyond my dad about the Beach Boys, by the way. Good vibration. Like I always like the high notes that they hit. Always, like, so I brought up on 60s music pretty much. Like my dad, he's 70. He was 70 this year, so you know he obviously grew up on 60s, and you know going everywhere in the car, and bands like the Kinks, Beach Boys, you know, bands like that I absolutely worshipped. So it's amazing. I never thought we'd be talking about Beach Boys on this, and in fact, like you, I need to stop myself talking about it any more than I am now, otherwise we'll be here all day. So You've got good taste anyway. So,
Thank you.
what does the... So, just one more on the music, and we're going to go full on Disco Elysium, okay?
Mm.
Is there anything upcoming that you're working on? Obviously, you've just published an album, so I imagine you probably want to just relax a little bit. But is there anything that you're working on or anything that's upcoming that you are excited to tell us about?
Oh, actually, a friend of mine who's another yeah, shout out to Shona Cassidy. She has a song out called Persephone. It's wonderful. I should have shouted her out earlier. She's going to be mad at me. But she was given out to me because I posted on that hellish private story of mine. So I know you brought up, like, I've just published an album. I actually have 2 tracks ready to go to put up on the channel already. This is a new laptop that I'm on, better than my old one's got more RAM and a better processor, so I've just been playing with it and like loading up as many plugins as I can, and it doesn't seem to stutter, and I'm like gonna cry tears of joy. It's wonderful. But I've 2 tracks, 2 new fan tracks ready to go. There's one based on Animal Well, and there's one based on Civilization. I'm gonna say 7 purely for the clout and to attach myself to that, but it really works for any game. So I have those in the works. The main thing going forward now is I expect soon enough to be starting back up on commission work. So if you're listening and you need music for something, I'll do it, and I will do it for fairly cheap. I'm estimating very low rates. I'd say around 40 to 50 quid per track, because I like working efficiently. But that'd be the main thing, and then obviously focusing on the masters. I want to go like full steam ahead with compositional work again. Like, some people said to me they were expecting me to do kind of more of a rollout with my own album, and I was like, no, I'm happy with the attention it has. I'm very much like, okay, great, that's done, and now I'm going to move on.
Yeah,
I don't want to get too caught up in it, you know.
Yeah, it's a good approach, I think, because otherwise you end up obsessing over it and then worrying about numbers and all of that stuff, right? I think it's quite a healthy thing. Amazing. So yes, game people, movie people, Tarantino. When you need the soundtrack for what apparently is your last film, if you believe what he says.
I don't believe him.
No, I don't believe him either. But
I think he's like, Hayao Miyazaki.
Yeah.
Hayao Miyazaki's
just my last one.
Hayao Miyazaki, yeah, he comes back to the studio sounding like an addict. He's like, just one more. More. It's going to be about a boy and a heron. Just one more. You know?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Right, we're going to talk about Disco Elysium now, which is weirdly it doesn't feel like it's been much of the theme of this Disco Elysium podcast. Actually,
I feel like people are going to be like, yeah, I listened to that one with your man who did God Please, and they didn't talk about the game at all.
Yeah, exactly. Oh dear, no. I think people are just interested in the human beings we have on here. I hope, anyway. That's the point of it.
God, I hope.
So, pretty simple. When did you first play it? How did you discover it, etc.? What was your history with it?
I'd heard about the game basically since it came out, because, believe it or not, I actually don't play a lot of games at the moment purely because of time. And unfortunately, I don't expect that'll change once I'm doing this masters. But I do keep in touch with a lot of games journalism and media and stuff. And I remember when did it originally come out? 2019.
2019, right? Yeah.
So I remember hearing about it a lot. I know my brother loved it. My brother really loves like CRPGs and stuff. For his 30th birthday there, my sister-in-law just got him a PS5 with Baldur's Gate 3, so he's happy.
You won't be hearing from him again then, yeah.
No, he's been gone. But yeah, I'd heard about it for ages, and then when it came to the Switch, the like final cut, I played a bit of it, didn't get too far, for no other reason than just, again, time. And then once I had the time and sat down to play it, it was that I love that kind of wonderful moment with any piece of media where you hear it being hyped up to, I think you said in the Jamrock Hobo episode, where you're like, well, like, it can't be that good if it's that popular. Exactly. And then you play it and you get that wonderful moment of like, oh my God, like, of becoming
what was
just
I
as
doing?
Like, what was I doing?
Yeah, very similar experience, and obviously I've already covered it on Jamrock Hobo, as you mentioned, but yeah, it was just one of those things. I think the weirdness of it always, I was like, because was it lockdown, I think, when I first played it, and I was like, I don't want to spend £50 on this weird game that I might not like. That's the thing about it. It was only when it went on sale I actually bothered. And now I'd pay hundreds and millions of pounds to experience that game if I had it. So how would you sell the idea of Disco Elysium to someone who has never played it?
So I was thinking about this question, and I thought there's a great, I think it's a Steam review for the game. Because, you know, most Steam reviews are kind of copy-pasted jokes and whatnot. But I did see a Steam review for Disco Elysium, which was like, it's a game by depressed communists for depressed communists. And I was like, yeah, I'd pitch it as like, you're a detective and you wake up and you don't remember where you are and you've got to solve a murder. And also, that's all a lie. The game kind of presents itself like that, and you very quickly realize that's not the point of the game, like at all. There's a much wider discussion going on in that game, you know?
Yeah, it's like that's the elevator pitch, right? It's quite a hard thing to explain all of the amazing facets of Disco Elysium. Stushy replied, so Stushy's a YouTuber, did a really good piece on the PMG documentary, actually. And she mentioned on Twitter yesterday that the thing about Disco Elysium, because I think I tweeted something about, you know, when he lights the graffiti on fire. And I said something about how beautiful a moment it is in a game full of beautiful moments. And then she said, you know, the thing about Disco Elysium is a moment like that in most games would be that one moment, right? But Disco Elysium's got tons of them. It's got loads of these huge marquee moments. And actually, it's hard to get that across to someone because A, you're spoiling the game. B, it's a lot to explain. You've got to add so much context. It's like, oh yeah, but if you do it like it's very, very difficult. But if you say, imagine you're a detective who is supposed to solve a murder, but then you wake up completely forgetting everything because you're, like, for all intents and purposes, completely hungover. And I think that's an intriguing enough idea that people go, well, that sounds like a pretty mad situation. So I always like, I think that as an elevator pitch, that's what's going to get people through the door if it does. Sadly, I think sometimes people go in with that elevator pitch thinking, and this is, I see a lot of people bounce off it early because it's reading and it's asking lots of questions. A friend of mine, he can't stand dialogue options in games. So it's literally just like he can't wait to get the conversation over. It's like, no, you need to be really interested in what people have got to say in Disco Elysium. It's basically a choose your own story novel, really.
Pretty much.
Yeah, so it's a hard thing to sell, but just fucking play it, whoever you are. And if no one who's watching this,
surely if you're this far in, I
mean, but just in case, go and play it. Who's your favourite character in the game, Paul?
So, look, like, obviously it's Kim. I wrote a whole piece of music about him. But I would say Kim is my favourite because I think Kim... I have this feeling I've discussed with people before, like other friends who are really into their games, about Disco Elysium, where I've said, and I mean this as a positive, I think personally, at least just for me, Disco Elysium is a game I find it really hard to role play in because you play something like Fallout New Vegas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a game that has a lot of its own pretty nuanced moral choices and whatnot. But there's a lot of, you know, really horrific violence in that game that, because of the tone of those games, is played quite comedically, and you can kind of just brush it off.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm in a game and I murder a whole town of innocent people, there's a layer of detachment there, right? Where I can roleplay as this evil, terrible, like, legionary, whatever. But Disco Elysium, I remember describing to someone, I said, the consequences in Disco Elysium are usually not things as heavy as death. It's more just horrible shame or embarrassment. And I think that's great because it's so involving for you as the player. There are bits in that game that make me, like, I feel sometimes playing that game like I'm watching like an episode of Peep Show. You know, you just get that, oh, Jesus Christ kind of quality.
Please stop.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes Kim such a great character, because Kim is effectively kind of your moral conscience.
Mm.
It's not like you have an angel or a devil on your shoulder. You more have your dad looming over you at all times. And
Yeah.
he's not mad, he's just disappointed. And
Yeah.
it's just gut wrenching. Like I honestly, I don't know if I could play the like. You see people who play the game doing like a fascist run, and I'm like, I physically couldn't do that. Like
Mm.
every time Kim would get upset with you, I'd have to turn the game off. You know?
It's probably the hardest thing I ever did. I did it for the channel. I was like, oh, I've got
Oh
to.
God.
I have to have it on there, right? Because there's not many. There aren't many places that have it actually. For the reasons you just described. But you're absolutely right. It's weird. This weird kind of, you know, that they say integrity is what you do when no one else is looking, right? That's the measure of your integrity. Is like if you could steal something and literally nobody would know, you can do that, but your level of integrity will determine if you do that, right?
Yes.
And it feels like every time you are venturing into these absolutely insane decisions and lines of dialogue, that you're like, well, actually, he's keeping an eye on me right now. Like, how I can't possibly side with this racist lorry driver, and you do a lot of that stuff, and it's really sad actually. Like when you first engage with the racist lorry driver, and I think there's a dialogue option. It's something like you can either call him an arsehole, or you can go, yeah, I can get down with racism. And when you say that, Kim's like, sorry, what did you just say? And he pulls you to one side, and he just kind of says, look, it's fine. I know these ideas exist. I've dealt with people of this persuasion all my life, and it's just like this really sad explanation of what it's like to be an ethnic minority surrounded in a world of racists. It's like they've had to like get used to it, which is appalling, and now you're their partner in this investigation, and you're another one added to the list, and he's just kind of like, get on with it. I'm not gonna.
I think it's also a really great deconstruction to me of like the way we think about RPGs, where you'll kind of do anything as long as you progress. That's the goal. And there's something incredibly sobering about having a character pull you aside and go, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, you're a racist now? Like, you're never." I think really, I can't think of another game that confronts you on a
Yeah,
level like that. A game that would take such issue with you compromising your own principles. You know, it's
yeah,
a real. I think it happens as well with when you're talking to Joyce. This happened to me playing the game the first time. I was talking to Joyce, and I was treating it like I treat like Fallout New Vegas, right?
mm-hmm.
Where I'm kind of going, it's like a dance trying to get information out of her. And then she goes, oh, well, maybe if you do this for me, then I'll tell you this. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, great. Okay, so this is how I progress. This is like a fetch quest, fine. And then Kim pulls you aside and he's like, we're the police. We're not errand boys. What are you
Yeah,
doing?
yeah. She's like, he says that she's running rings around him, pretty
Yeah,
much.
I felt awful when he said that. I hadn't even considered that, you
Yeah,
know.
and of course, we talked about it already on the first episode. But the way it really catches you out to the thing that you're talking about, just the completion of task, and this is what the game does is really clever. Actually, it took that gamer instinct to just progress, and it put all of these little obstacles in the way that it's not just defeating a dragon, level 99 dragon to get into the cave. It's a massive racist stood at the harbour door who seems to be, and the easiest way to get into the harbour is actually being racist, signing up to his advanced race theory and like going off and then coming back like, fully on board with your fucking absolutely wild theory on race. And then it's like, actually, hang on a minute, I've just, for the sake of completing a task, I've just signed up to be a racist. It's ridiculous, but it's very funny. Like, because
It is.
90% of people will be like, no, how do I go back? And it's too late. It's too late. Very funny. Do you have a favourite skill set? So what would you pour all your points into? Physique, intellect, psyche, or motorics? I've got a follow-up question.
I think I did it. I think I did intellect when I played it because I like playing games like that. Like I like playing say Fallout with like a high speech thing. Even though
Mm,
there's an argument that that can make the game a little too easy at points, but I like having as much dialogue as possible. Which
yeah.
is weird because you were talking about people being put off by the game because there is so much dialogue, and yet I'm somebody who reads far less than they should, but for whatever reason it's like trying to feed a dog medicine so you slip it in with their food. If you give me the literature in the form of a game, then I'll be like, oh yeah, I'll read this.
Yeah,
And it's reams upon reams. It's like reading there's like I remember seeing the number of like the actual amount of dialogue in that game
a
is
million
absurd.
words or something.
It's something like that, yeah, yeah.
I got a figure wrong when speaking to Lenville. I thought he had 350,000 lines, but he had 350,000 of the words. So,
Mm.
I think the biggest game in terms of lines of dialogue is Red Dead 2. It's got something like 500,000 across 1,000
Oh really?
actors. Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
Apparently, anyway, according
Didn't know
to
that.
Google,
I
which
do actually remember seeing a picture of the like. Obviously, it's not like a film script because games are different. But I do remember seeing some picture years back of like a script for Red Dead 2 that was like it looked like you could club somebody to death with it. It was
yeah,
pretty.
it's because they'll have like multiple lines for just some guy who's pissed out of his face in a saloon. The level of detail they go into is ridiculous. What would be your signature skill or your favorite skill?
So now, forgive me here. I haven't played the game in a while. When we say skill, are we talking like the?
Individual, whichever one of the skills that speaks to you in your head. So like
Oh
Half
yes,
Light or
yes. Okay.
Shivers or one of them.
See, I'd probably go with Shivers
Mm-hmm.
because I think Shivers is a really brilliant. Do you know Jacob Geller, video
Yep,
essayist?
yep.
He's excellent. I love his stuff.
I
And
really want him to come on actually, but he hasn't read my DM,
oh, that'd be
which makes me
if
sad.
you you can't have him on because I will brag to so many people and be like, I've already been like, I'm going on this podcast and Lenville Brown's on it. If Jacob Geller goes on it, like that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
But he has that video about Disco Elysium and he makes a great point about how like Encyclopedia and Shivers serve kind of the same function
Mm-hmm.
of like worldly knowledge, except Encyclopedia is matter of fact and by the book, and Shivers is more, I guess you'd say, artistically or maybe even like spiritually minded. It's more the kind of feelings and intuitions that only somebody. What's the metaphor he uses in that video? I think he says it's like a taxi driver, like the kind of like asking
Yeah,
somebody who knows city planning versus somebody who's been driving a taxi around that city for 20 years.
yeah.
Little
He
things they
gets the
would know.
vibe and little intricate things about the place that he's in. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I love that skill. I can't remember how many points I actually put into it in the game, but I always loved whenever it would pop up. I think some of the best writing in the game, for my money, is Shivers.
yeah. Agreed. That and Esprit de Corps are my favourites because they kind of take you away into these different stories, and you get a lot of the world building, as you say. Like Encyclopedia is exactly that; it's world building, right? But Shivers does it in that way, beautifully described actually by Jacob. And it's one of those that I didn't really invest too much. I stayed away from physique and psyche for my first couple of playthroughs because it always seemed to me that, well, the two things I'm going to need the most are intellect and motorics. Like it feels like they're the things you need, but actually you get way more out of the game if you pour a load of points into the other two because you get all of this world building stuff that goes on. It's amazing.
Mm.
So we already discussed your favourite piece of music from the OST, so we won't cover that one again. But I would like. Do you have a favourite line of dialogue in the game? Is there any that stuck out to you?
Mm. Actually, when I was kind of thinking about these questions, that was one that came to me like immediately,
Mm.
which was I have always actually, well, could I cheat? Could I say two?
Of course you can. You do what you want on this
So,
podcast, mate.
so when you were talking about pitching the game to people,
Mhm.
one thing I neglected to say is I also tell people, I'll tell them what a horribly dark game it is in many ways and how depressing it is and all it deals with. And then I'll tell them it's also the funniest game I've ever played. Like, I have laughed
Yeah.
out loud so many times at that game. There's that line when you're going through that dream sequence where Harry sees his ex
Hmm.
and you've the option to try and kiss her, which I don't know why I went along with it.
I
The game,
know.
I should have learned at this point that that was a bad idea, but I did. And of course, if you do, I think it's volition or
Hmm.
no, suggestion. I think it's
Suggestion. I
suggestion.
think I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, the brother, you should put me in front of a firing squad. There are no words for how I failed you. I think I'm paraphrasing that, but
Yeah.
I howled the first time I played. Like, that's because it's such a powerfully sad scene and it's so perfectly undercut by how funny that line is. And
Yeah.
then the other one would be oh, I think this one's Volition is a lot of people's favorite line in the game. It's kind of a passing one. Is the you're looking at a map or something, and Volition
Mm.
says, you know, this is all you have: streets and sodium lights, the world, the sky. You're still here, effectively. I think it's
You're
brilliant.
alive. Yeah. You're still alive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's absolutely beautiful.
very
Some
visceral writing. The sodium lights is such a weird detail
Yeah. I love
to
that.
focus on. You
And
know.
they do a lot of that actually. The way they describe things and their little analogies and metaphors that they litter throughout the game are so good and makes they just make perfect sense. I shared
Mm.
one yesterday on Twitter actually, which I'd forgotten about. I was doing I was editing a couple of videos and one popped up on and it was which you may not have seen actually because it's you have to be pretty fascist to do it. But when your stomach starts talking to you, and in the end, like your endurance is trying to tell you that fascism's really about hating women, right? It's the whole women thing and all of
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
And you're responding to your brain going, no, actually it's about, industry and, patriotism and, love for your country. I'm absolutely fine with women. And endurance responds with, of course you are, brother. And then in brackets it just says a wink shaped growl comes from your ass. So I thought it's absolutely genius, and then there's obviously there's the line when to the other end of the spectrum. If you build up enough honor and keep being nice to people, I think it generally triggers after you offer to find Lena's husband, the cryptozoologist.
Yeah.
Um, and there's authority kicks in with the whole thing about honoring yourself, forming the arch of honors, which is basically just sticking your thumb in your ass. So there's loads of mad shit like that, and that's the thing about it, right? It is a depressing game in some aspects, but it's also very hopeful, and it is absolutely hilarious throughout.
Mm.
Okay, just conscious of time, by the way, so I'll try and get through these a little bit quicker, and just shout up if it's taking too long. Favorite moment in the game?
Now, see, I feel like because of, why I'm here, I should say the tribunal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we're being honest, I probably would still have to go back to that moment. Maybe actually, I'd say the whole lead up to getting to the deserters island, you get that boat ride with I think it's Burn Baby Burn plays
Mm-hmm.
over it. That's just fantastic. Like, as wonderfully written as the game is and everything, I'm actually in your episode with Jam Rockobo, he said he's somebody who's not like hugely artistically inclined. He's more into literature and
Yep.
discussion of like political theory. And I thought that was funny because I was like, I'm the polar opposite. I'm very artistically inclined. I'm not so great at the other stuff. And
Yep.
I think that's why moments like that more stick with me. Like, I love that whole boat ride has this sense of finality and tension to it, and the music is just superb. And then, of course, when you land on the island and you get La Revacholier playing,
Mm.
just those big swelling kind of strings that they're blended in as well on the soundtrack with like little insect noises and
That's
stuff.
right. Yeah, because
With-
if you invest in Col de Mamadakwa, the fort, you get a little orb as you go up the stairs on the island, and then Harry hears Col de Mamadakwa again because Koldamadakwa is linked to cryptozoology, which is obviously then, of course, like the reason you hear it on the island is because obviously there is a phasmid on the island. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of many things that are hidden and mean that everybody has their own unique, beautiful experience. That's what I love about the game. But it's a great moment that you mentioned. Actually, and I love the when he gets the jukebox out just before he gets in the boat, and Kim's like, "What do you need that for?" And he's like, "How else do you expect me to play Sad FM as we go across to the island?" as if like it didn't need like. Well, what did you expect me to do? Just go have a boombox on my shoulder? Come on.
I love it. It reminds me of that. Another one of my favorite lines in the game is when now forgive me, I haven't played it in a while, but I think it's you're in the Whirling in Rags and you're trying to convince, I think it's Kim, that you want to do karaoke. Yeah. And you can like a petulant child, you can say, but Johnny Law has to tear it up sad style or something. It's just brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. There's so many good stuff like that. Do you have any wild theories about Disco Elysium?
Well, I'm going to use this opportunity to spring this question back onto you.
Ooh.
What do you think is the possibility of Kim and Harry being gay together?
I think it's canon. And
you think so?
I won't have anyone argue against the gay loving between them. No, that's I think so. Kim is gay, obviously. That is confirmed in the game. Harry, I suspect he's bisexual. Actually,
I do too,
and I think, but I also think that's kind of up to you. And if you base it purely on the story that you get to have in Disco Elysium, you might not necessarily experience, some of his homosexual tendencies. Like, not everybody's going to explore the conversations with the smoker on the balcony as much as others. Yeah. But you get a lot of that if you pursue that. You realise that there are things appealing to him about the smoker on the balcony, and there are other men in the game who Harry has these kind of internal thoughts about how how physical they look and how they look like strong men and stuff. So he has a type as well, I think, sort of athletic. So yeah, I think the only thing that I think would block those two having a relationship in the future is Kim. I don't think Kim is the type to mix work and pleasure.
No, that's very true.
And I also think he's only experienced Harry in this small vignette moment, right? Or this small little pocket of time. Jean-Vic Mayer is obviously a much better reflection of what Harry can do to a relationship with people close to him, as is the ex. So I think those combining factors would mean that Kim's probably just a little bit too, hands off, doesn't want that kind of shit going on in his life. He's very vanilla, isn't he? And he's very kind of clean living kind of guy, Kim. And I think the chaos
probably better for it as well.
Yeah, I think the chaos of Harry in a relationship would be insane.
I was going to say I do love how those interactions are written, though, where it's kind of hinting at him being attracted to men, because it seems very obvious to the player. But I might be misremembering this, but I swear in any of those scenes, it's very obvious to the player, but it's not very obvious to Harry, which makes for some great writing. He's always like very on edge, like, what is this? What's going on? And him being attracted to them, he never really considers. It's always anything else.
There's a really funny bit with which is exactly what you talk about. When the smoker in the balconies, I can't remember if it's in the whirling or at the balcony. But he's kind of saying to Kim, he's like, something about him, his shirt, and Kim's like, his shirt, and the amount of buttons he does is like, okay, and like Kim's kind of getting it. He's like, right. Yes, like you're just listing the things that attract you about this guy, but Harry's like, what's going on? What is this stuff? You're absolutely right. He's just kind of like, what is this thing that's going on in my brain? Because obviously he's completely lost any part of him, and like, you know, sexuality and sexual attraction is ingrained in you. So like, he might not have the memory of his bisexual nature, but in him it's there, right? Very, very, very funny, and they do handle it incredibly well. Is there anything that you don't like in the game or would change if you could?
See, for me, it's really nitpicky stuff. It's like I think sometimes the world design, as beautiful as it is, can be a little tricky to navigate. I was playing on. See, I want to be like, there's some performance issues, but then I was like, I'm playing it on the Switch, so that's kind of to be expected. Otherwise, it's like obvious stuff. Like I saw a meme a while ago about like when you have to go talk to Clausier, and you've got to, like, what do you got to do? You got to go into the whirling in rags and then out the back up the stairs. And then you got to go into her room, and then you got to, you know, like little things like that. But when I try and think of an actual genuine criticism, there's nothing. That's what puts it like as probably my favorite ever. Like, to use an example of a game that does have one, I know I said I adore Doom Eternal.
Yeah.
But I could not in good faith be like, yeah, like Disco Elysium, if somebody asked me, I'd say it's basically a perfect game. There's really very little wrong with it. Doom Eternal is very close, but I hate the later bosses in that game. Suck. And I don't know why they're in the game, and I think they could just take them out and it wouldn't make a difference. You know, that's like a genuine criticism. But for Disco Elysium, not much.
No, I agree. If I was to, again, mine would be really picky, and it's the kind of thing you only experience if you dive into it on the level that someone like I has, where I basically kind of tried to take the whole game apart. Is that sometimes, like, if you jump ahead and you get, you know, a lot of stuff done ahead of kind of the scheduled arrangement of the story, sometimes like the dialogue doesn't make sense. Like, they'll be saying stuff about Harry and it'll be like, well, we already know he's established X, Y, and Z. But that's no one's fault but mine, right? Actually, the way that the way they laid out the game is, and I was talking about it the other day, and it's like every single facet of what makes up Disco Elysium, as you rightly, it pretty much is perfect. It's like this. The art is amazing. The way that they used the art with the game is incredibly clever. The music fits it perfectly. There's not a single line of dialogue written in that game that doesn't A, make sense, B, fit, or isn't just brilliant. And I think do you know what I've seen people criticize actually is the ending, but I genuinely think that they don't understand the ending. The whole, you know, people are like, well, you know, it wasn't even any of the people I was investigating and stuff like that, because people want that kind of satisfying gotcha moment where they arrest, I don't know, Titus Hardy or whatever.
Yeah, and it wouldn't fit the game tonally, I don't think.
No.
If you had like a rounding everybody up tour de force, here's what happened to X, like in the Fallout games, they do that reel at the end.
Yeah. And
I think that works in Fallout because there's a pulpy kind of quality to Fallout, but I don't think that would work at all for Disco Elysium. It wouldn't fit with, you know, the idea of subverting tropes became kind of, as far as I'm concerned, sort of redundant and obnoxious by the end of like the 2010s. Not going to start on Game of Thrones, but you know yourself. But you know, but I think Disco Elysium is a good example of something that does it really well, where like subverting gameplay tropes, like we were talking about, like you know, the guys playing petanque as a minor example.
Yeah.
You can chuck the ball in, and they'll be like, "What the fuck?
What the fuck did you do that for?"
Petanque now.
Yeah.
It's great, and I think it would completely go against that kind of mentality to do like a Jesus at that stage. Not to be dramatic, but you might as well have everybody like waving at the camera for the credits, you know. It wouldn't fit, I don't think.
Yeah, I always think the whole point of the Deserter was that you know, the whole theme around Martinez and where you are is that it was forgotten, you know, after the revolution and all the rest of it, and you know, the moralists are supposed to have saved it and all the rest of it, but you look around, it's bleak. And all the ideas of old have been forgotten and left behind, and the Deserter represents that exact thing. I think, you know, a forgotten part of history. which still holds some value in the world.
I think it's a really bold ending too, because of how the game, it's a game so steeped in political ideology, and then its final confrontation is somebody who has basically lost their life to being, I would argue, like too overly attached and entrenched in one ideology.
Yeah. I think ideology is we talked about this with Jamrock Cobra. This is exactly what I felt that they were going for, is because people are always like, oh, it's this ideology or it's that. Well, actually, all of the ideologies get a fair kind of crack. And I think really the message about the game is that ideology is quite a dangerous thing, because it means that you're kind of entrenched in one way of thinking, which means you're not open to listening to other people's opinions. You're not open to the wider the viewership of the world, and that in itself means that you lose sight of the wide and varied experiences of human beings, which means that you can't understand your fellow man unless obviously they're your ideology, and it's a dangerous thing. And we should always be willing to listen to the other side, even if they do need to be told to fuck off afterwards.
Yeah,
as long as you get to that point, it's fine. Were there any particular, so there's lots of little side quests and stuff, are there any particular stories or side quests that jumped out at you, or you immediately think of, or resonated with you in the game?
Could you just broke up a teeny bit, say that again?
Sorry, were there any particular stories or side quests in the game that resonated with you?
See, I've shot myself in the foot now. Earlier, when I mentioned when I cheated and said 2 lines, because I was gonna bring up, I love the whole thing. That whole bit with Harry's ex is fantastic. I guess otherwise, I'd say I really love how they handled that side quest with the man on the boardwalk.
Yeah, that's a big favorite.
That's really, really humanely handled. It's a great moment where the game. It shows how well they handle humor and handle the tone of that game. It's one of the rare moments, well, maybe not that rare, but it's a moment where, like, when you go to confront her, thank God I didn't mess up that check, but I found out if you do mess up that check, it's just really sad. It's just, you can't really comfort the woman. It's not played in any kind of darkly comic way. It's just a quiet, disconcerting moment of being too
blunt,
socially inept to help someone. And again, that's that thing I love about that game, of that's something that you can relate to. That's what makes it painful and involving. You've probably had an experience like that in your life. It's not like in, say, not to shit on it, but like in Fallout 3 when they're like, you want to blow up a town. Like, I've never done that. But I have been closed off enough that I can't help somebody, and that's very powerful.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a couple of bits of that story which really stick out to me. And it is probably, one of the most beautiful. There's a moment when you find the body on the boardwalk, and it talks through the alcoholic side of this guy, and it's Harry assessing, because he's got a load of chewing gum in his mouth, and it talks about, there's a little line that says, he had a bottle of Pilsner or something like that, and in Harry's brain it says, a little treat for a day of, hard work, which is how addicts generally work, right? It's when they get to the point that they're taking the substance they're addicted to, they're kind of telling themselves they've earned it, because they've been able to resist it all day and gone to work. I've done such a good job resisting it. I'm gonna have a little treat now, and that's kind of how an addict's brain talks themselves into the good things about the thing that they're addicted to. Is like, no, you've earned this, or this is good, this is your free time, you're allowed it, kind of thing. And then there's another moment a little bit later, and it's just before you go in actually, and you say to Kim, or you can say to Kim, I really don't want to do this. And as a human being faced with that, I always think the worst job in the world is a police officer who's got to knock on the door and tell someone that news.
Oh God, yeah.
I have no idea how they do it. And there I am faced with that exact decision, and like, whether I like it or not, I'm doing it. I was like, I don't want to be the one that has to deliver this news, but you do. And then like afterwards, you know, obviously it goes well, and Kim says he doesn't make a big song and dance out of it. He just kind of gives you a nod and says, you know, you did well there, because he understands just how difficult it is. Yeah, really beautiful. Right, so you've got 2 more questions. 2 more. Okay.
Let's go.
Where would you have liked to see the game go next if there was ever a sequel? Did you ever have any thoughts on that?
See, I found out a while ago that I'm in a somewhat like hot camp take of, I was really heartbroken by what happened with Zaum. As you know, you could argue fitting it is, but it is awful that it happened, and it's awful that they don't have the rights to the game now and whatnot.
Yep.
But, and I preface with that because I don't want this to come across as insensitive or insincere, but I was never that upset by the notion of like there won't be a sequel. I was always like, to me, Disco Elysium is such a perfect feckin' game. I would be down for more of it, but I wasn't like heartbroken. It's like, right, you know, I mentioned Spelunky.
Yeah.
Spelunky's like the perfect game. Like your man from IGM was saying, you know, it's so tight, it's so masterfully put together. And again, I know it, like I know that game better than I know some people in my life, to be honest.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you things about them, but I could say, oh yeah, well if you jump at this point and right?
Yeah.
And he actually did, Derek Yu, who made it, he made a sequel, Spelunky 2, and Spelunky 2 is fantastic. It's such a good game, and it is not as good as the first one, and I will die on that hill. And
Yes.
I couldn't help but think another Disco Elysium would have the same thing. I do not see how you could make a game better than that first one. Now, if they did, I definitely like to see a very different protagonist. Because so much of Disco Elysium is colored by the fact that you are playing a pathetic person who's not very good at things. And it'd be interesting to see how the view of the world would change with a different protagonist, you know? But I think it would have to feel fundamentally different. Like, there's some rumor or something that the sequel was going to involve like a pregnant protagonist?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know anything about because the only indication I have of what happens in the future is through Sacred and Terrible Air, and there was
the book.
The book, which I think is like 30 or 40 so years after the events of Disco Elysium, I think, or something like that. I haven't read the book, to my shame, actually.
I haven't either, yeah.
And there's a line right at the very end of the game, an esprit de corps line that goes out to Captain Price, and they're talking about some sort of revolution. So on the one hand, I'd be interested to see where it went with that. But I actually I'm with you a bit. I think I pine for an experience like Disco Elysium again. Does it have to be Disco Elysium? I don't know. I think it'd be very difficult, because the thing that makes the game so good is this development and growth that you go through with Harry, right? You start with a blank slate. Okay, you have some points poured into a little bit of this and that, but it's that voyage of discovery and how you imprint yourself on Harry Dubois that really makes the game amazing. So if there was a sequel, I wouldn't want it to be Harry, because I struggle to see how it would work.
It wouldn't make sense.
No,
given the arc he goes on.
Yeah, you can't kind of do it again, really. So yeah, I think I'm like, yeah, that's where I am with it. I can live with the fact that Disco Elysium exists. And we're very lucky that it exists.
And I think there's a danger as well, like you were saying, you'd like to experience something like that again, and it's like, to me, there's a danger there of like, you know, part of the painful trade-off of having a wonderful experience with a piece of art, even if you want to go as far to say like life-changing, is that you can't have it again. And if you could have it again, it wouldn't be quite as special.
Exactly, yeah. You only get that little magic once, don't you? Yeah. And I know I haven't played anything, I haven't experienced it since, which is a credit to the game. Like nothing has made me feel the way I feel about Disco Elysium. Hence why I haven't got any other YouTube channels, I suppose. Otherwise, I feel passionately about it.
I'm looking forward to the Peggle 2 channel that comes after this or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Dear, that would be a turn for the books, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Final question, and you can make this one word, or you can explain why. Communism, liberalism, moralism, or fascism?
Now, right, I'm going to say communism. And the reason I'm going to say communism, I know I just told you I'm very artistically inclined. I'm not the most well-read politically. So the reason I'm going to say communism is because if I don't, my mother and my brother will kill me, right? My mother, they would both be self-described socialists.
Yeah.
My brother's a PhD criminology, right? So he knows his stuff. Yeah, to my detriment. I've got 7 years to catch up to him, so that's nice. But me mother, or there's my accent. Me ma, she's she is like, she says she's a socialist, but she has a strange fixation with Soviet, like Russia and the
Oh,
Eastern
really?
Bloc. So
Interesting.
I was just in Berlin, right? Myself and my mate went over for like a little week holiday. It was lovely. And when I told my ma, oh, we're thinking of going to Berlin, she was like, immediately, she was adamant. She was like, you have to go to the Stasi Museum in East Berlin. You have to, which is where the offices where effectively the East Berlin government kept surveillance on people. And it is fascinating, but like, again, my ma, if you ask, she'll be like, no, I'm a socialist, Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
This woman watches Chernobyl to relax. She's watched, the HBO series. She's watched it 5 times. She watches I walked in on her once, and she was like, "Oh, it's just something to stick on after work," and it's a scene of a man who's horribly irradiated in a hospital bed.
Oh,
So
amazing.
I'd be doing them a disservice if I didn't say communism.
I actually said moralism because I think I'm probably a bit of a centrist, but I do lean more on the left side.
I worry that I am sometimes too.
Well, I suspect I am, but I also feel really far away from right wing. So I feel like when I say I'm centrist, I'm like, actually, am I? Because I don't feel like I have too much alignment with that much on the right at all, especially what it currently looks like. I mean, you're supporting some nutters.
I think for me, it's like very specific key issues as well. I feel very strongly about.
Yeah.
Like if we're talking like economic policy, I don't know, I'm clueless. But if it's like trans rights, then I'm like, no, then I'm very, very far left.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it depends, I suppose.
Yeah, if it comes to people, and the duty of care that people have to other people, I'm 100% all in on the left. Like,
yeah, I'd be the same.
Stop being a fucking dick to people. Like, we all bleed the same. This is what drives me nuts. Like, if the aliens invaded and we were all supposed to be on the same side, like, we're fucked.
Yeah.
Because we'd be too busy deciding who should survive and who shouldn't. Like, we're a bloody dangerous species, to be honest.
I mean, yeah, it's like that. Not to derail, but I'm sure you saw, like, one of the craziest things I've seen in ages was that whole thing at the Olympics.
Yes.
With your one where she was accused of your one that's very like man from Dublin. I'm not from Dublin, but that's me dad. But your one who was accused, like it was something to do with testosterone levels, and then like J.K. Rowling was just talking out of her arse, like complete waffle nonsense. And it wouldn't be relevant anyways.
There's a great joke about J.K. Rowling. Well, it's not even a joke, to be honest. It's just hilarious, the irony of it. But she identifies as a man to write under Robert Galbraith. And
she does, doesn't she?
And
yeah.
and I just think, does she not realise how fucking stupid she looks when
the irony of that?
Yeah, like she does that, and then she's out there criticising everybody for just wanting to live their life as happy as they can. It really pisses me off, actually.
Well, now she's now she says we should, what did she say? She was like, athletes should have public DNA records, and I was like, how do you say a sentence like that and not hear yourself? You know what I mean?
Have you seen all of the memes about her the darkness taking over. Like she's got mouldy walls and stuff, and they reckon that she's like this. I can't remember if it was a video or pictures. She did an interview, and there was like black mold on her walls. It's like this fucking woman is like some evil witch in an umbrella
She's
lab.
gone nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, that is an amazingly happy and cheery note to like fuck J.K. Rowling. There you go. There's a nice little note to end on.
I hope she's listening.
Yeah. She's big Disco Elysium.
Yeah.
41st. Oh dear. No. Listen, right, that is the end of the show, Paul. You've been an absolutely amazing guest. I really love talking to people who are really passionate about the game. It's amazing. So I just want to end on saying thank you, obviously. Thank you to everyone thank you to everyone who listens to the podcast. And most importantly, what I want everybody who's listened to is to go and check out Paul Looney on YouTube. You're on Spotify. You're also on SoundCloud. You are on Twitter. Do you have a musical Instagram? You mentioned your private one. Do you have a...
No, I might make one soon. My main one is like my personal one. So people who follow me on there have to put up with all that anyways. But yeah. I might separate them sometime.
Yeah. Search Paul Looney if you're not sure.
It's not that common a name. There's a sex doctor over in the US with the same name, but that's it. So don't mix us up.
Yeah, God, that could be interesting. So many emails you'd get after that. Yeah, search Paul Looney on any of those platforms where you get your music. And of course, if, you're already here, so I assume you know the 41st Precinct. But if you don't, share the video and do all the good stuff like following us wherever we are. And with that, that's another episode done. Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you again soon.